Hi, Sariana van As here with another art journaling tutorial for Stencil-Art. I made use of a variety of products in this tutorial that will be listed at the end of the video and is available at www.stencilart.co.za. To create the circled background, watch my video on making your own bleeding tissue paper. Apply a wash of Heritage Metallic acrylic paint in topaz blue and water over the circles and dry with a heat tool. Use the Fichinella stencil and dab Heritage Free Flow acrylics in various colors through the stencil. You will see that I use a small amount of paint and even dabbing some of it off on a paper towel. If you load too much paint on your brush, it tends to seep underneath the stencil and you won't be able to see the pattern. The other advantage using a dry brush is that you can move the stencil and layer the images. Dry this layer with a heat tool before moving on to the next step. Tear strips of bleeding tissue paper and adhere to the background with gel medium to create seagrass. Here I'm trying to mute the colors of the background with white linen dilutions ink spray and was quite surprised in the opacity of this spray. I even sprayed water over the dilutions, but in the end used a paper towel and some plastic netting to wipe off most of the white ink spray. Spray Polish J dilutions ink spray through the sea damask stencil over the background. Mask off the sea corals from the sea creature stencil and spray with dry martini dilutions ink spray. Stamp the mermaid from the Julie Nutting's doll stamp set by Prima Marketing on the Daler Rowney heavyweight paper. I used an orange Inktense block to color the mermaid stamp and then pressed it on the paper that was lightly sprayed with water. The ink from the Inktense blocks are permanent when it dries. I'm coloring my mermaid by using my Derwent Artbars by picking up the color with my water brush and applying it to my image. I like the popcorn and blush color for my skin tones. What I like about watercolors is that when you add different colors over each other while they're still wet, it will move and blend on its own. You can also remove some color if you need to by dabbing it with a paper towel while it is still wet. I'm using my Inktense pencils to outline the hairband and the top, as it is easier to get into the tiny spaces with the pencils. Carefully cut out the mermaid so that you can adhere her to the background with gel medium. Remember to let her dry before moving on to the next step. I decided to replace the pink bikini top of the mermaid with the seashells that were included in the stamp set. Instead of stamping and then colouring the small seashells, I'm colouring the cardstock with a mixture of pearl acrylic paint and a drop of Calypso Teal Dilutions ink spray. Colour the stamp with blue Inktense block and stamp the ink in the still wet paint. The image will dry permanent. Carefully cut out the seashells and then adhere it over the bikini top with gel medium. Use the blowing bubble stencil and apply glass bead glitter gel with a palette knife. Use the palette knife to clean up and remove some of the circles while the gel is still wet. Add some more circles, but be careful not to place the stencil over the still wet circles. I tried to dry the glitter gel with my heat tool, but it kept bubbling up, so I left it to dry on its own. You will see that the gel dries clear. You'll also notice that where I applied the gel too thick, the circles were still not completely dry. I always draw pencil lines to help me with the placement of my words for my quotes. I'm still trying to avoid the glitter gel that was not entirely dry. I also always write out my quote with pencil first, and when I'm satisfied I will go over it with my markers. Add some details and shading with big brush pens. I used a white glaze jelly roll pen to add fine details to the mermaid. You won't be able to see the immediate effect as the ink is clear when applied, but it dries a white opaque color. The India ink in the big brush pens takes a while to dry and is perfect for blending only when applied over a non-porous surface. In this case, the gel medium acts as a sealer over the paper. Add some of the pearl paint to the mermaid's tail to add subtle bling, and then add more shading with the big brush pens. Go over the quote in black with the silver edding calligraphy paint marker and then with the extra fine blue one. Add definition and color to the glitter bubbles with the big brush pens. Draw some swirls with the Fishinella stencil and the white glaze jelly roll pen. Add some highlights to the quote with the white edding paint marker and details to the mermaid with the silver edding paint marker. This markers have some open time as well, so you can blend it immediately after application. Some more swirls to balance the page and then the date. Thank you so much for joining me.